I transmigrated into a tragic romance novel as the cannon-fodder supporting character. The cold-hearted CEO, Selena Tang, hated me to the core and was determined to force a divorce for the sake of her true love, Vincent. Jason Harlow, if you don't sign the papers, I'll break your legs. I calculated the alimony I'd receive and immediately signed the divorce agreement. This is hilarious. Whoever wants to be the cannon fodder can have it. All I want is to enjoy my life. When I woke up, I found myself basking in the sun in the middle of a vast estate. It took me a moment to process everything. I, a humble sausage vendor, had somehow transmigrated into a tragic romance novel as the pitiful cannon fodder supporting character. According to the book, I had a business marriage with Selena Tang. I had been deeply in love with her for over a decade, but she didn't love me back. Her heart only belonged to her true love, Vincent. In the story, I did everything I could to break up the leading couple, resorting to all kinds of villainous acts, only to fall off a cliff in the end and die without a body to bury. The thought sent shivers down my spine. The original Jason Harlow was nothing more than a stepping stone for the protagonist's love story, a total throwaway. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't repeat his mistakes. Just as I was about to roll over and continue sunbathing, my phone rang. It was Selena Tang. The moment I answered, she shouted furiously, "Jason Harlow, get over here right now." I suddenly remembered. Yesterday, Selena had asked for a divorce, but I refused. In a fit of rage, I even went as far as to have Vincent kidnapped. Luckily, Selena arrived in time with her bodyguards, and Vincent only suffered some minor injuries. Now she was out for blood. I hung up, panicking. I had hurt Selena's beloved. She was definitely going to make me pay for it. No, I had to run. Determined, I quickly got up and headed back to the house. The estate was enormous, and by the time I reached the living room, I was drenched in sweat. Selena and I had been sleeping in separate rooms. She never allowed me into hers, but I knew where she kept her valuables. The original Jason was just an adopted son in the Harlow family, never taken seriously. He wasn't given any shares of the family business, and his bank account had little to show for it. If I wanted to escape, I needed more money. I grabbed a sapphire necklace. This thing screamed expensive. Selling just a few pieces would keep me financially secure for the rest of my life. While searching, I stumbled upon a sketchbook. Curious, I opened it. It turned out to be a birthday gift Jason had given Selena. Every page was filled with portraits of her, dating back to when she was a teenager. Each sketch was carefully dated and meticulously preserved. It was clear that the original Jason Harlow had been hopelessly in love with Selena. But no matter how deep his feelings ran, they were worthless in her eyes. I recalled a scene from the book. On his deathbed, Jason begged Selena to look at him one last time, but she didn't spare him even a glance. Her mind was wholly consumed by Vincent. What a fool. I put the sketchbook back and continued searching for jewelry. As I walked out of the room with my loot, I spotted 2 bodyguards heading my way. It was over. I couldn't escape now. Half an hour later, I was dragged into a private room. The moment I saw Selena sitting in the center, I froze. Her delicate and beautiful face, flawless skin, and aristocratic aura were absolutely stunning. No wonder the original Jason Harlow loved her to death. She was truly breathtaking. Vincent sat next to her. Like every true love character in romance novels, he had a tragic backstory, a handsome face, and an inexplicable ability to make the heroine swoon. The rest of the room was filled with second-generation rich kids, all watching me with gleeful schadenfreude. Selena glared at me coldly. "Jason Harlow, kneel and apologize to Vincent." Vincent tugged at Selena's hand and softly pleaded, "Let it go, Selena." But Selena refused, her voice firm. "No. He dared to kidnap you. He has to pay the price." I knew she wouldn't let it go without humiliating me to vent her anger. Fine. A real man knows when to bend and when to stand tall. Surviving was my top priority. With a loud thud, I dropped to my knees. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gu. I shouldn't have had you kidnapped." Selena froze in disbelief. The other people in the room were equally stunned. "Do you want me to bow too?" I asked. Before Selena could answer, I bent down and slammed my head against the floor. "Enough." Selena snapped, throwing a divorce agreement at me. Her voice was ice cold. "Jason Harlow, if you don't sign this today, I'll break your legs." I glanced at my long legs and shivered. Looking down at the divorce papers, I finally understood why she had called me here. I stood up and flipped through the agreement. What? 200 million in alimony and 10 properties after the divorce. Oh my God. There was such a sweet deal in the world. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I didn't mean to cry, but the offer was just too generous. Selena frowned at my reaction, mistaking it for reluctance. Jason Harlow, if you don't sign. Before she could finish her sentence, I quickly signed my name with a flourish and handed the papers back to her. When shall we get the divorce certificate? Selena looked utterly bewildered. She didn't expect me to agree to the divorce so easily and was visibly shocked. Jason Harlow, you agreed to the divorce? I glanced at Vincent Gu and sighed. Your true love is back now. I might as well be generous and let you two be together. Selena Tang, though surprised, didn't think much of it. After all, getting the divorce was all that mattered to her. We finally agreed to go to the registry office early the next morning to finalize it. As I walked out of the club, I couldn't resist taking out the divorce agreement and counting all the zeros on it again. So much money. In real life, even if I worked tirelessly selling sausages every day, I could never make this much. No need to buy a new house either. I could pick one to live in, and the rest could be rented or sold. Just thinking about it made me feel ecstatic. Selena sure was generous. But for someone like her, this was probably just pocket change. I had just returned to the estate when Selena called me. Come to the family home. With that, she hung up. I glanced at the time. It was around dinner. Could she be inviting me over for a meal? A family like the Tangs probably had amazing food. Feeling hopeful, I rushed over. As soon as I stepped into the Tang family home, I noticed something was off. Selena and Vincent were standing in the middle of the living room. Mr. Tang was sitting on the couch, his face dark with fury. I guessed he'd found out that Selena wanted to divorce me for Vincent and was now fuming. Vincent glanced at me before turning to Mr. Tang and saying, Uncle Tang, you can't force a relationship. Besides, Selena is already carrying my child. I hope you can bless us. Oh, great. Turns out Selena had already made me the biggest fool on earth. But wait, there wasn't a pregnancy subplot in the original novel. Was the system glitching? Whatever. As long as the money's there, I don't care about being a fool. Selena looked at me with a slightly complicated expression. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, Mr. Tang slammed his teapot to the ground. He pointed at Selena, his face livid. How could I have raised such a shameless daughter? He went on to berate her for a good while. I stood quietly to the side, not saying a word. I didn't love Selena, so I didn't feel hurt. Still, as a man, I couldn't help feeling a bit annoyed. She was really disrespectful to the original Jason. But then I thought about the 200 million alimony, and my mood instantly brightened. When Mr. Tang was done scolding, he ordered the servants to throw Vincent out. Though he was furious about Selena's disgraceful behavior, he eventually agreed to the divorce. Perhaps feeling guilty toward me, he even gave me several pieces of jade antiques. I clung to him, crying, "Thank you, Dad." The next morning, Selena and I went to the registry office to process our divorce. As soon as we got out of the car, I spotted Vincent standing at the entrance. What a persistent guy. He looked different from yesterday. His demeanor was smug, and he gazed at me with an air of superiority, likely because Selena was carrying his child. He probably thought he had won. Whatever. I'm not the original Jason Harlow. Why would I fight him over Selena? I don't want to be some love-stricken fool anyway. All I want now is to finalize the divorce, grab my huge alimony, and live a carefree life. There weren't many people at the registry office today, so it was our turn quickly. 10 minutes later, Selena and I walked out, both looking dejected. Vincent rushed over nervously. Selena, did you get the divorce certificate? She shook her head. No. Vincent frowned. What happened? Did Jason go back on his word and refuse to divorce? I rolled my eyes. You've never been divorced, have you? There's a mandatory cooling off period now. We have to wait 30 days before we can finalize it. I had just learned about the cooling off period myself. What a hassle. Feeling annoyed, I didn't notice Vincent's slightly evasive expression. Soon after, he raised his voice. Of course I've never been divorced. What's with the shouting? It's not like I care whether he's been divorced or not. Vincent glared at me angrily. Jason Harlow, I'm warning you, don't even think about backing out. You'd better show up to finalize the paperwork. I chuckled coldly. Fine. Whoever doesn't show up is a dog. Hearing that, Selena's face turned green with anger. But I couldn't care less whether her face was green or red. I strode away without looking back. To ensure nothing went wrong with the divorce and my alimony payout, I made a point of showing up in front of Selena every day, annoying her to the point of hatred while trying to see if I could get anything else out of her. After all, I'd suffered enough chasing her for years. It was only fair to get some extra compensation now. When it comes to money, the more, the better. Eventually, Selena couldn't take it anymore and tossed me a black card. Take this and get out. Looking at the card in my hand, I couldn't suppress my grin. Sure thing. I'm leaving right now. Still frustrated about not being able to finalize the divorce immediately, I decided to cheer myself up. I went to a luxury car dealership and treated myself to a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. And yes, I used Selena's card to pay for it. Though she was undoubtedly a heartless person, she had never been stingy with money, which was one of her few redeeming qualities. Driving the luxury car down the street, I was turning heads left and right. Well, who wouldn't be dazzled by a luxury car paired with a handsome driver? I headed to the hospital for a full checkup to ensure that once I had the money, I'd still be alive to spend it. As I walked out of the hospital, I heard someone calling my name. Jason Harlow. I looked up and saw a woman standing in front of me. It was Fiona Hayes. She had been childhood friends with the original Jason and had secretly liked him for years. Unfortunately, Jason had never returned her feelings, choosing instead to chase after Selena Tang relentlessly. This rivalry naturally made Fiona and Selena enemies. After Jason and Selena got married, Fiona rarely kept in touch with him. I shook my head. The original Jason must have been crazy to ignore such a sweet and lovely girl like Fiona. Fiona asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" "No, just here for a routine checkup," I replied. "What about you?" Fiona lifted a bag in her hand. "I'm here to pick up my dad's heart medication." She paused briefly before continuing, "I heard you're divorcing Selena." I nodded. "Yeah. She's pregnant with Vincent Gu's child. Why would I stick around for that?" Fiona looked shocked at first, then seemed to ponder something as she studied me suspiciously. "Jason, it's been a while since we last met, but you seem different. You used to be so fixated on Selena." Not wanting her to notice anything odd, I coughed lightly and said, "Chasing her all these years with no response. I'm exhausted. She can love whoever she wants. Besides, look at me, I'm handsome and rich. I'm not worried about finding a wife." Fiona kept staring at me, as if trying to figure something out. Feeling a bit uneasy, I forced a laugh and said, "Anyway, I've got something to do. Let's catch up another time, I'll treat you to a meal." Fiona was too sharp for her own good. Worried she might notice something, I quickly walked away. With 28 days left in the divorce cooling-off period, my daily routine consisted of eating, drinking, shopping, and packing. I made sure to pack as much as I could. Everything could be sold later. As soon as the cooling-off period ended, I reminded Selena to finalize the divorce. She frowned at me. "Jason, why do I feel like you're more eager to get divorced than I am?" I couldn't help but wonder what man would want to keep a symbol of infidelity on his head. My eagerness to divorce was perfectly reasonable. "I'm thinking about you," I said. "If we don't finalize this quickly, what will you do when the baby is born? Whose name will go on the birth certificate? Surely not mine." Selena was silent for a few seconds before looking at me. "Jason Harlow." I cut her off. "All right, enough talk. The baby isn't going under my name, and I'm not playing dad. Let's just wrap this up." Her expression turned sour, but I didn't care. As we headed to the parking lot, Selena's phone rang. Whatever the caller said made her face turn pale. She hung up and grabbed my arm, her expression tense. "Vincent is missing. Did you do something? Where did you take him?" "Vincent Gu is missing," I asked, shaking my head quickly. "It wasn't me." Selena didn't believe me. "Impossible. You must have hidden him because you don't want the divorce," she accused. "Jason Harlow, you're despicable." I sighed. The original Jason might have done things to hurt Vincent, but I wasn't him anymore. I'd been too busy making money to do anything shady. Still, I didn't want anything to happen to Vincent. If he was in trouble, Selena would definitely blame me. How do you know he's missing? Have you searched properly? I asked. Selena glared at me angrily. She explained that they had planned to have lunch together. An hour before their meeting, she had sent someone to pick him up, but he wasn't answering his phone, and no one could find him. Take me to his place, I suggested. Maybe we can find some clues. Selena stared at me for a long moment before warning, Jason, if anything happens to Vincent, I won't forgive you. I didn't bother arguing with her. Finding Vincent was the priority. At Vincent's apartment, I looked around but didn't find anything unusual. Could he have vanished into thin air? I wondered if he ended up like me, transported into another novel as a minor character. Selena glared at me furiously. Jason, if you're playing any tricks. Suddenly, I heard a sound. Before she could finish her sentence, I rushed into the bathroom. The door swung open to reveal Vincent sitting beside the toilet, sleeping like a log. The strong smell of alcohol lingered around him. Selena hurried over, kneeling in front of him. Vincent, wake up. Vincent. He slowly opened his eyes. Selena. Why are you here? We were supposed to have lunch. Did you forget? She asked. Vincent stood up, rubbing his head. I forgot. I went out drinking with friends last night and had too much. I turned to Selena's bodyguards. Didn't you check the bathroom? The guards lowered their heads. We didn't think Mr. Gu would be in the bathroom. Fair enough, who would have guessed he'd be passed out next to the toilet? What a peculiar place to nap. Selena glared at her bodyguards and scolded them, useless bunch. I rolled my eyes. For someone hailed as a powerful and intelligent businesswoman, her logic was laughable. I said, Dear soon-to-be ex-wife, could you double-check your facts next time? Stop falsely accusing me, all right? After all the tension and worry, it turned out to be a complete misunderstanding. This time, it was my turn to look annoyed. Before Selena could say anything, Vincent Gu interjected, if it weren't for you having me kidnapped last time, Selena wouldn't have doubted you. I couldn't help but laugh in frustration. All right, fine. But if you plan to sleep next to a toilet again, give me a heads up next time. You. Vincent started, but I didn't bother engaging with him. Instead, I turned to Selena and said, let's go finalize the divorce. Don't delay my alimony, all right? The Civil Affairs office was unusually busy that day. We had to wait in line for quite some time before it was finally our turn. Thankfully, we got the divorce certificate in the end. Along with it, I secured the money in the house. I was ecstatic. From this moment on, I was free to enjoy life to the fullest, fine food, good drinks, and living the high life. Selena noticed the grin on my face. Jason Harlow, what are you so happy about? After enduring humiliation and frustration for so long, I had finally gained my freedom. Of course, I was thrilled. But I didn't feel like explaining myself, so I brushed her off. Nothing important. I'll be leaving now. That very day, I moved out of the estate. I chose a spacious apartment in the city center. It wasn't as large as the estate, but it was the perfect size for just me. As for the other properties I owned, I rented them all out. When the Harlow family found out about my divorce from Selena, they were furious. They called to demand that I beg Selena to remarry me. To them, I was nothing more than a pawn in their scheme to bind the Harlow and Tang families together. I ignored them completely and blocked every single one of their numbers. What a joke! If anyone else wanted to play the role of the disposable supporting character, they were welcome to it. I was done with that nonsense. That evening, I went to a bar. Life is short, and it should be enjoyed to the fullest. After just 2 drinks, I ran into Fiona Hayes. Jason Harlow, you're actually drinking at a bar? She exclaimed. Her surprise was understandable. The original Jason would never have set foot in such a lively and indulgent place. I pulled the divorce certificate out of my pocket and showed it to her. I'm officially divorced. Isn't that worth celebrating? Fiona glanced at the certificate, then smiled. How about I join you for a couple of drinks? I tilted my head, my eyes twinkling mischievously. Why don't you treat me instead? The Hayes family, like the Tang family, was a mega-rich household, and Fiona was their only daughter. With her wealth, she couldn't possibly spend it all in a lifetime. I figured I might as well do her a favor by helping her spend a little of it. Fiona Hayes sat down, resting her chin in her hand as she looked at me. Selena's character might not be great, but she shouldn't skimp on alimony. I chuckled. Well, I'll probably get married again someday. Gotta save up for the future, right? Fiona raised an eyebrow. You've barely been divorced, and you're already thinking about remarriage? I shrugged nonchalantly. What, you expect me to stay loyal to her forever? Not happening. She's a closed chapter for me. For some reason, something I said seemed to amuse Fiona. She smiled and generously declared that my expenses for the night were on her. Overjoyed, I quickly ordered an absurdly expensive bottle of liquor. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel bed. To my shock, Fiona was asleep beside me. I panicked and immediately lifted my shirt to check myself. Thankfully, everything was intact. I hadn't lost my dignity. Fiona stirred awake, gave me a glance, and complained, if you can't handle your drinks, don't have so much. Dragging you here was a nightmare. You're heavy as a rock. She even stretched her arms dramatically. Apparently, I'd gotten drunk the previous night, and Fiona, to avoid any complications, had brought me to a nearby hotel. Worried I might throw up in the middle of the night, she didn't leave and ended up falling asleep as well. Looking at her, I couldn't help but laugh. She was much more reliable than Selena. I remembered an incident when Jason Harlow had fought with Selena and drank himself into oblivion. Selena, furious, had her bodyguards throw him out. He spent the night sleeping outside the estate gates. That was when Jason had sworn never to touch alcohol again. Fiona and I tidied ourselves up, checked out, and headed out of the hotel. Just as we stepped outside, I noticed Selena not far away, with Vincent standing beside her in a sharp suit, looking every bit the perfect gentleman. Selena had probably come to drop off a client. This hotel was owned by her family's company, after all. Fiona, thinking I hadn't noticed them, nudged me and gestured toward them. I shrugged. A proper ex should be as good as dead to you, so no need to greet her. As a mere supporting character in the lives of the main leads, it was better to stay as far away from them as possible. Selena's gaze lingered on me for a few seconds before she turned and said something to Vincent. He looked visibly annoyed but eventually got into a car and drove off alone. Selena, however, walked toward us, her expression dark. I want to talk to you alone, she said, staring at me. Before I could respond, Fiona said, I'll wait for you in the car, and walked toward the parking area. I turned to Selena. What's the matter, Ms. Tang? Her sharp eyes bore into me. What's your relationship with Fiona Hayes? I wanted to roll my eyes. Since when did an ex-wife have the right to question me? Casually, I replied, whatever you think it is, let's just go with that. My indifference seemed to catch her off guard. Selena pressed her lips together and finally said, I'm not pregnant. She's not pregnant. So Vincent must have used the pregnancy lie to convince her father to agree to our divorce. But what difference did it make? Her heart had always been with Vincent. Pregnant or not, it didn't change anything. Oh, I said, then work hard with Mr. Gu and make it happen soon. Selena froze, disbelief flashing across her face. What did you just say? I couldn't help but find her amusing. Ex-husbands as generous as me were rare. What more could she want? You've always wanted to be with Vincent. Now that you finally can, I wish you both the best. Selena went silent. Thinking the conversation was over, I prepared to leave, but she called out, Jason. I turned back. Anything else? Though I didn't show impatience, my tone made it clear I wanted to move on. Selena's expression was strange as she said, let me give you a ride home. I waved her off and pointed toward the car ahead. No need. Fiona's giving me a lift. Without waiting to see her reaction, I strode off toward the car. Once inside, I glanced back in Selena's direction. She was still standing there, motionless. Fiona shot me a sidelong glance. You're not still hung up on Selena, are you? Stop imagining things. Now, tell me, does that girl in the short skirt up ahead look pretty? My vision is still blurry from the drinks. I rubbed my eyes dramatically. Fiona rolled her eyes. Here I thought you were pining over Selena, but it turns out you've already moved on to checking out other women. Why would I pine for Selena? She's bad luck for me. For all I know, Jason Harlow might have been doomed by her, which is why I ended up in his shoes. Fiona burst out laughing. I looked over at her. I had to admit, her laugh was quite charming. The days that followed were blissful. I even went on a 2-week vacation and saw more of the world. It finally made sense why so many people dream of being rich. Life is undeniably better when you can just lie back and enjoy it. After I returned, Fiona Hayes came to my house to visit me. She brought some news along. Apparently, Vincent had married a wealthy woman abroad some time ago. Later, when that woman found a younger and more attractive man, she dumped him. After their divorce, Vincent came back to reconnect with Selena Tang. No wonder he got so worked up when divorce was mentioned last time. Selena, upon learning about Vincent's deceit, was furious and had a huge fight with him. During the argument, she accidentally fell down the stairs and got injured. At this point, Fiona looked at me intently. If you still have feelings for her, this might be your chance to show some care. She's in the hospital now. Fiona thought I wasn't over Selena because she had seen how deeply I loved her for over a decade. I scoffed. Are you kidding me? I plan to live a long and happy life. Just then, my phone, resting on the table, started ringing. It was Selena. I picked up the call. Hello. Her voice was hoarse and weak. Jason, I'm in the hospital. What does that have to do with me? I'm not her mother. Still, I replied, oh, take care and rest up. Jason, aren't you coming to see me? It was then that I remembered. 2 years ago, Selena had been in a car accident. During her hospitalization, Jason Harlow stayed by her side the entire time, taking care of her even more diligently than the nurses. Despite his efforts, she had shown him little gratitude. Now she was calling me expecting me to go and take care of her again. Dream on. We're divorced. There's no need for us to keep in touch, let alone for me to visit you. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. After ending the call, I noticed Fiona staring at me. Didn't you say last time that you'd treat me to a meal? It had been a casual remark, but apparently, she remembered it vividly. All right, I'll go buy some groceries. We'll eat at home. Fiona blinked in surprise. You can cook. The original Jason Harlow couldn't, but I could. Of course. Just wait and see, I'll whip up a feast. Mainly, I wanted to save money. If we went out to eat, Fiona would probably rack up a bill in the thousands. 2 hours later, as she looked at the spread on the table, Fiona gave me a thumbs up. Not bad. This could rival a professional chef. She picked up her chopsticks and started eating. Between bites, she kept praising my cooking. For someone like her, who was used to gourmet delicacies, to enjoy my simple dishes so much was quite the compliment. Seeing how happy she was, I felt a sense of satisfaction too. As I reached for a dish, my chopsticks fell to the ground. Fiona and I bent down at the same time to pick them up, and our hands accidentally touched. We both froze. Fiona's face turned bright red. She was clearly shy. She tried to pull her hand back, but I grabbed it. Fiona. She looked at me sharply. Truthfully, my heart was racing, especially with the way she was staring at me. Compared to Selena's cold and untouchable demeanor, I found myself preferring Fiona more. Despite her seemingly spoiled exterior, she was soft and endearing underneath. But in reality, I was just a clueless single guy with no real experience in relationships. Holding my breath, I leaned closer and kissed her cheek. Fiona's eyes widened. You. Before she could finish, the doorbell rang. I got up to answer it. To my surprise, Selena was standing outside. She had lost a significant amount of weight, her face looked haggard, and her head was wrapped in bandages. She had an air of fragility, like a tragic beauty. I shook my head. Really, all this over a breakup? I didn't peg her as the type to let love ruin her like this. Her voice trembled. I looked through that sketchbook and finally realized how much you loved me. I'm sorry, Jason. I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Jason Harlow's love for Selena was evident in those drawings. When I didn't respond, she started crying. Jason, I regret it. I never should have divorced you. I've missed you so much these past weeks. Can't you come back to me? The old Jason Harlow would have been heartbroken to see Selena's tear-streaked face. But I wasn't him. Tears or no tears, it didn't make a difference. Selena, there's no medicine for regret. We're done. There's no going back. She panicked. I don't believe you. I know. Her words were cut short as Fiona walked over. Fiona slipped her arms around my waist and said playfully, Jason, your sweet and sour ribs were amazing. I smiled. I'm glad you like them. Fiona looked at Selena, who was visibly stiff. Then, with a teasing grin, she added, You're so rude, Jason. Ms. Tang is a guest, aren't you going to invite her in? Selena's face turned pale, then paler. She cast a hurt look my way before turning and running off. Watching her retreating figure, I couldn't help but think, so even the heroine has her downfall. Funny how the tables turn. Fiona Hayes pinched my waist, puffing up her cheeks in frustration. What's with that look? You just kissed me, don't tell me you're planning to back out now. Snapping out of my thoughts, I reached out to pat her head. What are you thinking? I'm just afraid you want me. Fiona's face turned a deep shade of red, and in the next moment, she flung herself into my arms. I instinctively wrapped my arms around her tightly. I had to admit, this girl was soft and cozy to hold. After Fiona and I officially got together, she took me to meet her parents. Knowing her father had a heart condition, I brought some health supplements as a gift. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes liked me right away. They didn't mind at all that I was divorced, and they even asked when we planned to get married since Fiona wasn't exactly young anymore. I held Fiona's hand. Next month. Her parents grinned from ear to ear, nodding enthusiastically. Wonderful, wonderful. After chatting a while longer, they excused themselves and went upstairs. Fiona turned to me. You told my parents we're getting married next month, but we... She stopped mid-sentence when her gaze fell on the diamond ring in my hand, and she froze. I had bought the ring before visiting her family. I didn't want to waste any time. I was determined to marry her. Looking her in the eyes, I asked earnestly, Fiona, will you marry me? The ring was a 10-carat diamond, sparkling brilliantly. Sure, I could be frugal, but when it came to my wife, I wouldn't hold back. Fiona was so moved that she burst into tears. Smiling, I wiped away her tears, but she slapped my hand away. I froze, and then she said, What are you doing wiping my tears? Hurry up and put the ring on me. I laughed. She was afraid I'd change my mind and run, wasn't she? I slid the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around me in excitement. I hugged her tightly in return. With only a month until the wedding, there was no time to waste. I had to start the preparations immediately. The next morning, I accompanied Fiona to a bridal boutique to try on wedding dresses. After she chose her dress, she went to the fitting room to change, while I waited on the sofa. Suddenly, I felt someone staring at me. Looking up, I saw Selena Tang. Are you really going to marry Fiona Hayes? She asked. I nodded. Yes. The wedding date is already set. Her expression turned sorrowful. Can't you reconsider? Selena, I interrupted, meeting her gaze. You don't love me. You're just upset that I'm with someone else. It's your possessiveness talking. If Vincent hadn't deceived her, she wouldn't have thought of me at all. Selena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. That's not true. I always thought I loved Vincent, but after the divorce, I realized I was wrong. I miss you. I can't let you go. I love you, Jason. Not wanting Fiona's mood to be spoiled when she came out, I cut straight to the point. Even if you regret it, it's too late. Selena, I only want to be with Fiona now. Her tears fell uncontrollably. And look, I added, seeing you cry doesn't affect me at all. Don't you get it? I don't love you anymore. Selena froze, her body stiffening. Biting her lip, she turned silently and walked away. Outside, it had started raining heavily at some point. Selena didn't have an umbrella and let the rain soak her completely. She looked utterly miserable and defeated. I had never seen her like this before. She had always been so proud and untouchable. But inside, I felt nothing. Fiona emerged from the fitting room in her wedding dress, and the sight nearly blinded me. Darling, you look stunning, I said with a grin. Fiona blushed, a shy smile tugging at her lips. You're so full of it. I pulled her into my arms. I mean it. To me, you're the one I should love. Finally, the big day arrived. Fiona and I were both brimming with excitement and happiness as we exchanged vows. After the ceremony, I scooped her up in my arms, ready to head home. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw Selena in the crowd. But I didn't care. Lowering my gaze to Fiona, who was nestled in my arms, I couldn't help but smile with joy and contentment. Wife.